Thanks to Sheldon's Auto Parts Limited, the little giant in the business, we get a chance to dissect some very, very topical issues morning after morning at this time in what we call the big story. And we welcome you right now. Zohran Mamdani has made history as the newly elected mayor of New York City, becoming the city's youngest mayor since 1892, its first Muslim mayor, and its first mayor born in Africa. Despite starting with little name recognition, little money, or institutional support, Mamdani's charismatic campaign and progressive platform resonated with voters, securing his victory over former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa. His election represents a significant shift in the city's politics, potentially influencing the Democratic Party's future direction. Joining us this morning to look at this gentleman, newly elected Mayor Zohran Mamdani, his plans and his promises. We're joined by Professor Basil Wilson, retired provost of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice out of New York City, my guest at this time. Good morning to you, Professor Wilson. How are you doing today?
I am doing well, Richard B. Good to be with you.
All right. Thank you as always, Prof. Mamdani, let's talk a little bit about him, his background and so on, and his campaign. Can you share some thoughts on that?
Well, he is an extraordinarily gifted politician. He was born in Uganda, came to the United States at the age of 7. He has parents who are quite distinguished professionals, and he built. He was elected to the state assembly, served 3 terms, representing certain parts of Queens, and he opted to run for the mayoralty with very little recognition. But he assembled a volunteer army of over 100,000 people, something unprecedented, that fanned out into the 5 boroughs and, in fact, resulted in a turnout election of over 2 million voters that was not seen since 1969. And despite the amount of money spent by people who saw him as a danger, the Cuomo campaign spent over $40 million to try to stop him from acceding to the city hall. He won handily, over 9 percentage points, got about 51% of the vote, and he has demonstrated that his message of affordability and his ability to capture the imagination of young people has made him quite an upcoming politician in the Democratic Party.
So the voters gravitated a lot to his message, or more to his charisma?
Both. I think he is, in fact, very charismatic. He's quite articulate, and he had a message that was quite timely. New York City, despite the wealth, despite the fact that it is the financial capital of the world, has become unaffordable for many people who define themselves as working class or as middle class. And he stuck to that message, and he argued that he could make the city much more affordable in terms of increasing the amount of affordable housing, reducing the cost of transportation, making universal child care more affordable, and in fact, increasing minimum wages and making the city far more livable for the vast majority of people who provide the basic work that makes the city run.
Mm-hmm. How big a confidence booster is Mamdani's victory in terms of the immigrants and the minorities in the New York City area and in the United States in general?
I think it represents an interesting shift in terms of the dynamics of New York City. Some years ago, I wrote a book with a fellow colleague at Hunter College, who's now deceased, called The Struggle for Black Empowerment in New York City Beyond the Politics of Pigmentation. And what I was arguing then is that around 1980s, early 90s, white ethnics dominated power in New York City. And because of the increase of the change in the demographics of blacks and Latinos, no one group could exercise power and dominate power. So power had to be shared. It went beyond pigmentation. And so what the Mamdani election really represents is now the new influence of Muslims in the city. You have over 1 million Muslims living in the city. So the kind of Islamic phobia that Comer engaged in just cannot work. He was able to assemble a coalition of highly educated people in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, comprised of Southeast Asians, comprised of whites, comprised of Latinos, comprised of African Americans, and that really put him over the edge, and the message resonated with especially young people. And in fact, he was quite declarative in the fact that he was a democratic socialist. And he was not backing away from the fact that he was a Muslim and he was a democratic socialist.
Yes. Prof, how do you believe his relationship with, say, the city council and state legislature, and even President Trump, might impact his ability to pass legislation and to get support and so on? Do you see those as major hurdles or challenges that Mamdani might face?
Very important questions, Richard Lee. There are significant hurdles. The city is a creature of the state. And, it's not a question as if the city is autonomous. There's a city council, there's a commission of that it has certain rules and regulations. But even in terms of bringing about some of the policies that he has announced, he has to go to the state legislature, both the assembly and the Senate and the governor, in order to bring about, for example, his major initiative, which is universal child care, to bring down the cost of child care. And Hochul, who is in fact running for re-election and did not run that effective a campaign the last time she was re-elected, understands the importance of getting the support of Mamdani. So I would imagine that they would both collaborate. She will try and run on his coattails, and I think she has indicated that she's also committed to universal child care. And so therefore I would imagine that the fact that the Democrats have a majority in the Assembly and in the Senate, that they will be able to work that out and provide the funding for it. But there's no question that much of what he has to do, he will have to find that funding, and some of the resources coming from the federal government might be drying up, and we have to watch and look at the kind of antagonism that might develop between the Trump administration and himself.
I watched the majority of his victory speech, and that in itself has generated a lot of reaction. Some people thought that he was somewhat defiant. Some people thought he was too aggressive. I've seen public commentators suggesting that one of the first things he should do is to take up the phone and call President Trump. I see even this morning where Stephen Smith, well-known commentator, sportsman commentator, is saying that he has some concerns about Mamdani. What are your thoughts on his victory speech?
But I think Stephen Smith should confine himself to sports. He knows nothing about politics. He's in a lane that he knows very little about.
Okay.
I think in terms of the speech, it might have been unnecessarily confrontational. I think the big hurdle that he will confront in the city is, in fact, assuring Jewish leaders that he is committed to being the mayor of the 8.5 million people who would call New York City their home. There is a certain amount of fear within the Jewish community that he will not fight vigorously anti-Semitism. He has said that repeatedly, that he's committed to fighting vigorously anti-Semitism, but Jewish leaders have come out already stating those fears, and I think it is going to be incumbent on him to allay those fears, to meet with rabbis, to meet with Jewish leaders, and to, in fact, push the notion that rabbis, Jews, Muslims can, in fact, live in this city of being a city that is multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious, and can, in fact, govern in such a way that we can, in fact, transcend unnecessary conflict and really try to build what Ronald Reagan would call the city on the hill.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you now, Prof, to give me a comment on the implications of Mamdani's election victory for the Democratic Party, and also how do you see the message that his victory has sent to the Republicans, especially to the president himself?
Well, let me comment on it this way. Being a liberal democracy that has been somewhat committed to welfare capitalism. But since the 1980s, there has been a shift to an oligarchy that is largely preoccupied with greed, and where you have had increasing concentration of wealth inequality. And so one of the things that has been occurring since the 80s, and definitely with the kind of indebtedness which the country now finds itself in, it cannot continue with welfare capitalism unless the wealthy are willing to pay their fair share. And what Trump recently called this beautiful bill, which gave much more funding and tax benefits to corporations and to the wealthy and to billionaires, took away vital programs from people who need the programs, increased the cost of Medicare and Medicaid. That is just going to boomerang. And in fact, this is where the Mamdanis are going to be critical, that in order to bring about the kind of improvement in the living standard of the vast majority of Americans, you will have to deal with a social democratic form of capitalism in order for democracy to function effectively. Mm-hmm. That is what I think Mamdani brings to American politics.
Mm-hmm. So no doubt his victory will be shaping the political landscape for maybe years to come.
Yes, but there will be a lot of demagoguery trying to muddle the distinction between a social democratic order and this notion of totalitarianism or communism. Trump has not defined these terms, and in fact, America is quite sloppy in defining terms. And, you know, they argue that there's no distinction between a Marxist, Leninist, and a social democratic. And what Mamdani is talking about is similar to what exists in the Scandinavian countries, and where living standards are, in fact, very high, and where people enjoy a much higher standard of living than what exists in the United States, and dealing with the affordability crisis.
Professor Basil Wilson, we're out of time, but I really thank you for your thoughts and your time this morning. Have a good day. Talk again soon, Prof.
Thank you, Richard.
All the best.